Hey, so this sexual harassment, I was going to say scandal, but it's become bigger than that now because it's not an individual scandal, but rather it's morphed into something much more. It scraped Hollywood, and now it looks like it's scraping Westminster as well. Um, so I want to discuss what I feel will be the implications of this and a lot of things that have been going on. So, of course, we know about the Harvey Weinstein allegations. But after that, it started to morph into other actors, other producers being accused of things. Two high profile individuals recently is, of course, Kevin Spacey. The Metropolitan Police in London have just opened up investigations into possible crimes he committed here, um, and Dustin Hoffman. So we're talking big names here being put forward as potential suspects. And there's been mixed responses now in Britain. We've just had a political scandal in that our defence secretary, Michael Fallon, defence is traditionally seen as one of the important cabinet roles, most important cabinet roles, has had to resign. He's been replaced by one Gavin Williamson, which itself has caused something of a controversy because, like all related to the sexual business, that is that Gavin Williamson has apparently come from nothing. He's never had any military experience, he's never had ministerial experience, but he was chief whip. So a lot of people are saying this is the last mistake Theresa May will make, that it will be that she shot herself in the foot because Mr. Williamson apparently is widely distrusted by the Tories. So that's actually just another scandal in itself, i.e., May's bad judgment call on a cabinet appointment. Time will tell. So what we have here is a situation where a lot of people are being accused, and there's sort of two schools of thought. One is good, it's all coming out in the open now, and this needs to be exposed. The other is yes, there's something going on, but let's just slow down a little bit and not let this morph into a witch hunt. I'm somewhere in the middle. I feel that there was a time, let's say in the 70s, where there was absolutely things that would be unthinkable today in terms of not just in social attitudes like racism, but in sexual innuendo and things that too often were dismissed as banter. I mean, I'll give an example of this. There was a series of postcards popular in Britain in the 1960s. Well, let's say between the 50s and the 60s, the Bamforth series they were called, and they were absolutely sleazy. They're probably collectible items now, but basically without exception, every single one of them was about a busty young woman being salivated over by middle-aged men or men, and they were absolutely sleazy. There's no two ways about it. But at the time they were passable. Today they wouldn't be, and understandably so. So I don't agree with those who say it's just banter. I think that there is a real problem with certain men not knowing that there is a limit and not knowing that when you're making someone uncomfortable, it's not a trivial matter. I've said this before, for example, on the issue of builders wolf whistling. I don't think people should go to jail for that. But by the same token, I don't think, no matter how innocent you think it is, I don't think you have a right to make gestures towards a stranger, even if you think it's a compliment. If it's making her uncomfortable, you can't say that she's being stuck up or something. I think she doesn't know whether it's intended as a compliment or whether there's a potential threat there. So I think there's a basic principle: if someone is uncomfortable, you need to stop whatever you're doing. And from that point of view, I think there has been a real problem. However, I do feel it is very important to clearly define what harassment is. And I think that is very important because in a court of law, it would matter. I think there's a huge difference between paying someone a compliment that is non sexual in nature. For example, that top suits you, it's a nice color. Um, Whether it's appropriate or not, you can debate, but it's certainly not sexual. But if it's something like sexual innuendo, like what Michael Fallon allegedly said, then things like that are a different matter. Now, I should say on the Michael Fallon case, what he had, his initial apology came from touching a journalist on the knee 15 years ago. The journalist herself said that it was a non issue and that nobody was remotely distressed or offended at the time. I thought, well, that's a bit strange. Fallon isn't going to quit over something like that. So I knew there would be more to it. Now, it subsequently emerged that he made inappropriate innuendo to a colleague, Andrea Leadsom. So the old saying, there's no smoke without fire, I think there's a lot of truth in that and what's going on here. I think what's notable is a lot of these allegations, the men being accused are not necessarily denying it. There are a few examples. The Labour MP who's been dismissed, I forget his name now, but he is outright denying it and saying it's false. So there's been different responses from the men who are being accused. In the case of Kevin Spacey, that itself generated controversy on the grounds that he admitted he was gay, and people took issue with him seemingly putting that in the same statement. To be honest, I think it would have been hard not to make that announcement as well, because the natural follow up, if he says I had inappropriate relations with this person, would be most people would have assumed, or a lot of people would have assumed, he's a straight actor. So that would have just, I suppose, he was just trying to answer the question before it was asked, kind of thing. But certainly, there was controversy from the idea that he was linking paedophilia, which essentially is what he was doing, if that is true, with being gay. Um, this is the cover of this week's The Week magazine. To sort of summarizes the situation here at the moment, I think there's a real problem. But I also think we have to be very, very wary not to get to a situation where men are concerned about having any communication at all with women. There's a lot of implications with this, and I know that there will be people who will dismiss this and say it's a trivial issue compared to the allegations. I don't agree, actually. I think that the social repercussions are very important, very important. If we get to a situation where men are frightened to communicate with women at all, I mean, people will say, oh, but you can communicate without any sort of innuendo, of course. But how about dating? I think we may have a situation where men no longer approach women. Men are expected to make the first move. So how are men supposed to, chat up a woman? And in Pakistan, this isn't even in the Western world. In Pakistan, not long ago, there was an actress. Apparently, I don't know all the details, but apparently she's a well-known actress, and she accused a man of harassing her sister because the man had sent a friend request. A friend request. Now, this isn't a part of the world where violence against women is a serious problem, but this was a friend request. And she accused him of harassment. Now, what a lot of people, commentators, including many women, said is she was being stuck up and using her fame and privilege as an excuse. I don't know all the details, but if that is true, if he had only sent a friend request, that's not harassment. So I do think that we have to be very clear what this is. Um, if a man says a woman is good looking, is that harassment? I don't think it is. Now, you could debate whether or not it's appropriate, for example, in a workplace environment. Certainly, personally speaking, I'm very wary of something like that. I would always be careful if I know if I know the woman, if I know what her sort of views on these things are, I'm not going to risk it. But I have complimented friends, female friends, when they've put photos on Facebook where they've been glammed up and they look good, they genuinely look good. I've complimented them. And I can honestly say, in every single case, they took it at face value, i.e., that it was intended as a compliment. They thanked me. And I feel that is the way it should be. Now, had I made a sexualized comment, like, I don't know, oh, wonderful tits, by the way, that would clearly be inappropriate. So I think you have to have a dividing line between uh, a well intentioned compliment versus something that is clearly inappropriate and sexualized. There is a clear difference. Clearly, there are some men out there who don't know the difference, and they then think a woman's stuck up if she takes issue with that. Well, you can't blame women for not wanting that sort of communication. And it does work both ways. I read a letter from a newspaper recently, a man who wore kilts, a Scottish guy. He wore kilts for traditional reasons at weddings and so on. And he mentioned that he had drunk women lifting it up. But hey, he's just a bloke, so he can't complain. So it does work both ways. You do get some women who also think they can push the boundaries simply because they're women and they'll get away with it. Um, I think the basic view, if someone's uncomfortable, don't do it. I certainly, for myself, I would not go further and I would apologize, but I would never make it sexualized in the first place. I think that's a given. That's just, it's not something you say in any sort of communication unless you're clearly in a sexual situation, like you're having sex. But in a place of work, it comes down to common sense. So I think there is definitely a problem out there, and I think as men we have to acknowledge that there's a problem and condemn it. And women have a right to raise concerns about this. But and I might be shot down for saying this, but I'll say it. I do think that some of these cases are dubious. And another point I want to make: there's a lot of issues I'm bringing in here, but they're all important. We have to be very, very careful about men being named publicly, like public men being named, and then it's like trial by media. Everyone rushes in to say, "Oh, what a scumbag! Oh, he's being exposed," etc., etc., etc. Before he has even went to trial. An allegation is just an allegation in the end of the day, and everybody is entitled to due process. I got annoyed with the BBC the other day because they presented an allegation as a fact. They actually put the quotation from the alleged victim as a fact. And underneath in the subsidiary headline, they had the accused. There is a difference between an allegation and a proven guilt. And there has been examples of innocent men being falsely accused of things. Look at Cliff Richard. So all I'm saying is we need to be very careful that people in the public eye are not tried by media. That's not to say that they're innocent. It's just to say that if we go down the line that you assume someone is guilty on allegations alone, that is a problem. Now, clearly, if you have a large number of women coming forward against one man, it's very, very likely he is guilty because the alternative is that they're all lying. And that's just not, that would require a huge conspiracy. So I am far more inclined to believe the women in those situations. But there are other times you have to wonder. Another big contention with this is that there's been criticism against some of these top actresses, A-list actresses, that were silent at the time. And people say, well, you were silent for the sake of your career, and that meant other victims were abused in that time. I've mixed views on that. On one hand, people will say it's victim blaming. On the other hand, it's hard to avoid. And I also frankly find it difficult to believe that if a woman is groped, that most women, I would imagine, would make an issue out of it at the time. I find it hard to believe most women are shrinking violets who aren't going to at least say something. I find that quite honestly hard to believe, because what it's insinuating is that all women are scared little girls who I think a lot of women would be angry and pissed off and they would react at the time. So that's another sticking point that I wonder about. And that was something that was brought up with the allegations against none other than President Bush Sr. I mean, it seems to me there isn't a single powerful man out there that isn't being accused, and there isn't a single high profile woman that isn't saying that she was a victim. At some point, you have to wonder, where is this being exaggerated and where is it true? I think there is a real problem. And I think it is right that we're talking about it and debating about it. But I don't want to see a situation whereby it then becomes hysterical and it's a case of, well, she's absolutely telling the truth. He's a pig. And if you say anything else, you're placating it or you're condoning it. Not at all. Speaking up for the importance of due process is not condoning harassment. It's not saying the men are innocent. It's just saying that that is vital. if you truly believe in justice, then these cases have to be investigated thoroughly, and where there is guilty parties, they have to be apprehended, no matter how powerful they are. So that's a good aspect about this, is that it's showing that powerful men are not above scrutiny. That's good, but there is hypocrisy in this, because if you look at the music industry, look at the number of female artists who deliberately use their sexuality. I mean, this is irrefutable. Those women cannot then turn around and complain about being objectified when the likes of Beyonce and others deliberately use their sexuality. It's irrefutable. It's just irrefutable. Um, so what I would say is women have every right to be angry about harassment. It's a serious problem. But I think there's a lot of hypocrisy going on here as well, in terms of saying that there's a sexualization of women when women often are those who are placating it and are actually endorsing it at the time. This is irrefutable. Um, so those are a lot of angles to consider. So I'll leave it there. Let me know your thoughts. To be clear here, just to summarize, I feel there is a real problem out there, and I think that has been shown. I think what we have seen is powerful men who have abused their positions, and whatever you think of the approach that the women took, their behavior is wrong. Full stop. There's no justification for it. But we do have to be careful to automatically assume that every single woman that comes forward is telling the truth. This might seem a little bit off topic, but sometimes you get tragedies or scandals where there is a lot of legitimate cases, and then you get one or two people who are taking advantage of it. For example, the Grenfell disaster. It was reported today that one of the so called victims was a con man, and he had claimed that his wife and two children had died, and that he lived in flat 18. It turned out there was no flat 18. Now, some people might wonder, well, what's that got to do with this? The point I'm making is, do not put it above certain women out there to take advantage of this situation and try and say that they were harassed or abused or raped to get some money, or maybe to get their own back on a man they've had an argument with. It's not inconceivable. So let's not present all the accusers as squeaky clean and all the accused as being scumbags, because I don't think it is that simple. I think each and every case needs to be investigated thoroughly, and if these men are guilty, they should absolutely face justice. Absolutely. But unfortunately, this is what I dislike about this is it's now becoming men versus women. I mean, that's absurd. Men should acknowledge that there's a problem, absolutely. But women, if you are saying that a man complimenting you is harassment, I mean, this is why it is so important that we clarify what harassment is. Because then you're going to have a situation where women will say, oh, I never get compliments. Why does no man ever look at me? Well, maybe it's because they don't want to be accused of harassment. And that's not to say that when women bring these things forward, that's what they're doing. But I think there is growing anxiety now from men that, well, I better be extremely careful anything I say to a woman, because something can be misunderstood. In other words, women will never be complimented from now on, because men will think if I compliment them, even if it's totally innocent and it's not in a sexualized way, I'm going to be accused of harassment. Mark my words, I think that will be a side effect of this. So I hope I'm not misunderstood here. I hope no one tries to accuse me of being an apologist. From the outset of this video, my position is there is a real problem. It needs to be taken seriously, and men who are guilty need to be held to account. But I believe they should be held to account in a court of law, not in the court of public opinion, not in the court of the media, in a court of law, okay, with evidence. So let me know your thoughts. There's a lot of things to think about there. I just really hope this doesn't destroy trust between men and women. Either women trusting men not to be predators, and men, trusting that they won't be falsely accused. Because this could be a side effect of what we're seeing here. And I don't think that's a trivial matter. I think that's pretty important. Right. Thank you for watching. Let me know your thoughts.